Well, thank you all for that wonderful and warm welcome, and thank you, Teresa, for that excessive introduction. And more importantly, let me thank the Indiana Commissioner for Higher Education for her outstanding leadership. I have known Teresa Lubbers for many years, and I said I didn't have the opportunity to reappoint her, but I would have. And Teresa, thank you so much for your great leadership. And thank you all for being here. This is a real honor to be able to be a part of a conversation that is going to go on all day today. I want to tell you how grateful I am to be here at the 2013 Weldon Conference on Higher Education and to be able to bring a few thoughts this morning about where we see the focus in higher education going forward, and how excited and enthusiastic I am about building on the extraordinary progress and the extraordinary reputation that higher education has here in the Hoosier State, and doing all that we can to do more every day to get more Hoosier young men and women to college and through college. And I'm grateful for the leadership of the commissioner and everyone at the commission for bringing us to this moment. I also want to acknowledge, I know that Tom Snyder, who started that standing ovation, which, thank you, Tom, by the way, for that. That was very gracious and kind. Thank you for your leadership at Ivy Tech. Dan Bradley at Indiana State University, Richard Helton, Vincennes University's president. Give these folks a round of applause. We're awful proud of their leadership. I know Charles Bantz, Chancellor at IUPUI, is here, and Jim Dworkin, Purdue University's North Central Chancellor. We appreciate the leadership. There are public and private trustees from across the state who are here, a variety of faculty and students, and I see business leaders in the room, men and women who I know have taken time away from their productive and profitable parts of their lives to make their state more prosperous. And so thank you all for your leadership and your devotion to this enormously important topic. I'm grateful to have a chance to be the warm-up act for your keynote speaker at 11 a.m. And I want to share a few thoughts with you this morning about the passion that I have. And I'm happy to report to you today what I think is very significant progress on a broad range of areas in not only the category of higher education in Indiana, but post-secondary education in Indiana. And it is progress that is being driven by leadership that we have seen from the people in this room in recent years. Now, I will tell you, I stopped counting the days since I was sworn in as your governor. But this is the beginning of my fourth month on the job. And someone said to me, how's that learning curve going for you, Mike? And I said, I don't remember a curve. I just remember a vertical rise from the morning after the election. And I'll tell you, as many of you know, have known me for a long time, I'm someone who believes that executive leadership is about focus. And it's about identifying goals and then working relentlessly toward those goals. And from the outset of this administration, we've sought to make job creation job one. And I truly believe that the issues that you're going to talk about today, aligning higher education and Indiana's economic future, are at the very center of our hope for a boundless economic future for the people of Indiana. And so while we're here to talk higher education, I don't have to tell people in this room that we're also here to talk about prosperity and opportunity and to speak to how we get this economy moving again. And not just in the present moment, but how we bring about the kind of reforms that will result in Indiana being able to realize on the boundless potential that our state has at this moment in our history. You know, on that day that I stood on the west front of the Capitol, I talked about Indiana's moment. And I truly believe that this is no ordinary time in the life of our state. And that if we will meet that moment with fresh ideas and renewed energy and a focus particularly on making sure that we create pathways for men and women in the state of Indiana, not only in the adult workforce today, but people that are involved in secondary education and people that are aspiring to enter that workforce and making their way through the K through 12 system today. If we will make the kind of permanent changes, that's going to be one of the most important keys that we turn in the lock of opening up economic opportunity in Indiana. And surely we need to do it. As we gather here today, despite the progress our state has made and the reputation that our state enjoys, we're the fiscal envy of the country. We brought about education reforms with the support of so many people in this room in our K-12 system. Offering scholarships more generously than any other state in the union. We're one of the most talked about states in the country. But as I stand before you today, unemployment in the Hoosier state is still stubbornly over 8%. 250,000 Hoosiers are out of work. And as the people in this room know, by some estimates, nearly 1 million Hoosier adults lack the training and the skills necessary to reach their full potential in the modern economy today. So we've got our work cut out for us. And it's work that ought to be focused on what is commonly referred to as the skills gap. Now, you all have heard the statistics. The Complete College America tells us that in 2020, 58% of colleges in Indiana jobs in Indiana, will require a college degree or a career credential. In Indiana, only 36% of Hoosiers have an associate's degree. There's a 22-point skills gap that we need to close in the next 7 years if we're to realize the full potential of our state. And let me say that the policies that I want to outline for you today, policies that we've been advancing relentlessly since I accepted the responsibilities of this job the day of my inauguration. These are policies that are really designed to close that gap. And let me give you one testimonial about the skills gap, because sometimes we get lost, it seems to me, in statistics. And I will tell you, as someone who had reason to visit all 92 counties of Indiana in the last 2 years, and maybe I'm the only person in the room that had a reason to do that, but I did it. And as I visited those communities, I went into businesses large and small, and I want to tell you, the statistics that you read about the skills gap, the passion that you will hear from our commissioner and from others today about closing that gap is real. I mean, in a state with unemployment stubbornly over 8%, I have to tell you, the most startling realization for me of traveling the state of Indiana over the last 2 years was how many businesses I walked into that didn't have a sign out front that said no jobs available, but how many businesses that had a sign out front that said we can't find people to fill the jobs that we have. And it's really created a focus in our administration, as it did when we articulated our roadmap last year, a focus on addressing workforce. And I think we do that in a couple of different ways. One that I will just touch on, although I'm here to talk about getting our kids to college and through college, I do want to acknowledge how grateful I am for the bipartisan support at the Indiana General Assembly for legislation that is headed to my desk this week to create regional works councils and to make career and technical education a priority again in every high school in the state of Indiana again. I'm extraordinarily excited about this because I'm someone that believes that all honest work is honorable work, and that our high schools ought to work just as well for our kids that want to go out and get a job as they do for our kids that want to go off to school. And let me say, some of the partners that we've mentioned here today are already leaning into this fight. Ivy Tech, Vincennes University have broken new ground in the state of Indiana in bringing industry certification and training and even the opportunity to obtain associate's degrees into the secondary education environment. And that's something that we want to be bringing out all across the state of Indiana. And the exciting thing to me about this legislation that I'll look forward to signing next week is that we'll do this on a regional basis. I mean, there's two special things about this idea for me, and then I'm going to get on and talk to you about higher education. Although we're talking about post-secondary education and utilizing the assets that we have at places like Ivy Tech and Vincennes and our other great institutions of higher education in the state, and making those pathways available for kids at the high school level is all part of the same thing in my mind. But let me tell you what the first thing that's special about it is that it happens in secondary education. The second thing that's special about it is it happens regionally. There is always a danger when things are being put together in any capital, in any place in the world, that the thinking of the capital would work everywhere else. And what's special about this bipartisan legislation is what it recognizes, that the curriculum that would be relevant in Vanderburgh County may not be the curriculum that's relevant in Allen County, may not be the curriculum pathways in high school for careers that are relevant in Bartholomew County. And whether it's Warsaw, or whether it's Bloomington, or whether it's Evansville, or whether it's in Allen County in the region, we're already seeing the genesis of regional curricular thinking on career and technical, and what I like to call vocational education as well in the Hoosier State. And what we want to do is institutionalize that and work with all of you and stakeholders around the state in education, in post-secondary education, in the political community, to say, what are the 4 or 5, pick a number, career pathways, curriculum pathways that ought to work in the school in your community for young people that want to be able to get the background and the education to be able to go out and compete for those good paying jobs that are available today. That legislation is headed to our desk. It's a signature part of the agenda that we've been advancing in our roadmap, and I gratefully acknowledge the leadership from both political parties at the Indiana General Assembly in moving this legislation forward. But as we focus on making the pathways in high school more relevant, and create opportunities for young people to bridge the skills gap, I think we also have to focus on a college education in the state of Indiana. Now let me tell you, growing up on 31st Street in Columbus, Indiana, we had a little cornfield in the backyard. Hawk Creek was just down the way. And my mom and dad would always say we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together when I was growing up. Started out, my parents made a very modest living. My dad was able to build a small business and did just fine before it was all over. But I will tell you, I never remember a day that my dad didn't put his finger in my face as the first person in his family to go to college and say, you're going to college. And I really want to make this very, very clear. As you hear your governor talk about my passion for bringing career vocational education into the high school level, I hope you hear in the same chorus, you hear that message, and you hear that same determination is going to. We ought to say to every child in the state of Indiana, whatever other message we're sending to you, we want you to go to college, because we understand what the statistics all say, but there's an aspirational message to that as well. And it's a message that says, regardless of where you start in life, we're going to make sure our schools work for you to have a boundless opportunity in your future. And it's important that we send that message. But right after we send that message, it's essential that we focus on making sure that not only we encourage kids to get to college, but that we help kids get through college. And working very closely with the commission and with Teresa's leadership and with so many in this room, our administration has already been working on this issue of moving kids through college and dealing with what I think is the primary challenge. I can tell you as a father with 2 in college today and one who's a senior in public high school here in the Indianapolis area, is dealing with the paramount issue at our household, and that is the cost of higher education. Cost is a major hurdle for so many families today, and right now it's a heartbreaking number, but it's a challenging number. Indiana is ranked 45th in the nation in terms of the state's cost per 4-year degree. Let me repeat that again. And as you hear us talking about the policy initiatives that we're driving, some of which may make some of our institutions of higher education a little uncomfortable in the days ahead, it's important that we understand our baseline. Indiana is ranked 45th in the nation in terms of the state's cost per 4-year degree. We have an average cost of $85,833 per 4-year degree awarded. The national median is $68,140. Okay? Now that is due in part to the fact that students are not progressing, I believe, to on-time graduation. I mean, I have to tell you, it's, when I was in college back in the late 70s, Animal House came out. And I know all the fashionable people here have never seen that movie, but there's a scene in the movie, I forget when John Belushi makes the comment that, 7 years of college down the drain. And it was a great punchline. But what's heartbreaking today is statewide on-time graduation in Indiana for Indiana's public university students was 23% last year. I mean, men and women. I can now. There's some accounting for that, and with the regional campuses are a reality, and we factor those things in. And also, as in one of my kids' cases, some kids change their major, and that impacts it. But only 13% of our 21st century scholars graduated on time. The national average for on-time graduation is about 31%. And so there is Indiana is underperforming in on-time graduation, and in terms of we are on the wrong end of the list on the cost of a college education in the Hoosier State. And that's where you're going to see our administration and legislation that we're moving as we speak through the Indiana General Assembly really focus in the days ahead. We've been working on this problem with a couple of initiatives I'll touch on, and then I'll close and let you get to the authoritative part of your day. And let me acknowledge that I've already met with several of the university presidents who I've acknowledged here today. We had a meeting in our office. We brought together all of the leaders in higher education in the Hoosier State. We're going to be meeting again and again and talking in full partnership with those that are leading our public colleges and public universities in this state for how we deal with this issue. And the ideas that we're moving through the Indiana General Assembly have been derived in large measure from those conversations and our policy team's work over the last year. But our focus is on three specific goals. Number one is making college more affordable by focusing the state's funding on programs that decrease the cost of degree completion. Our second goal is rewarding Hoosier College students who graduate early or on time. And thirdly is rewarding colleges and universities that increase on-time degree completion and provide clear pathways for students to finish degrees on time. Now let me say, in the area of affordability, I'm particularly pleased that just yesterday, the House of Representatives passed Senate Bill 532 with bipartisan support. This is a bill on our agenda. The bill allows the Indiana secondary market for education loans to provide direct loans to Indiana students to satisfy financing gaps created by the increasing cost of higher education and the shrinking pool of federal dollars available to students. The bill also allows ISM to provide financial education programs to students that will help them make responsible decisions on how to pay for higher education in the future. Now, I happen to believe the best student loan is the one a student doesn't have to take. And that's why we're supporting another bill this session that'll help increase on-time graduation rates and reduce the cost students incur by having to extend their time in higher education by 1 year or more. But I'm very, very pleased, and I want to acknowledge the bipartisan support for the Indiana secondary market legislation. I'm looking very much forward to signing that bill into law. The second bill that I'd referenced has to do with encouraging on-time graduation. That's House Bill 1348. It's passed the House. It's now pending in Senate appropriations. The Senate Education Committee members gave the bill a unanimous vote of support just last week. Now, I've acknowledged her a couple times, but I particularly want to acknowledge on House Bill 1348 the role of the Commissioner in helping us promote the kind of reforms that will bring changes to student financial aid to incentivize students to stay on track so they can graduate on time. This legislation will require public colleges and universities to commit to on-time degree pathways for each student seeking an associate or a bachelor's degree. Many of the institutions represented here today, of course, are already doing this, and I want to commend you for those efforts. But we have to, as I said earlier, looking at the tough statistics, we have to ensure that all students enter higher education with a plan for obtaining a degree and not merely accumulating credit hours. because we all know that it's a degree that provides currency in the marketplace, and so encouraging students to drive toward a degree in a coherent and careful way is a focus of this legislation. Now, we believe that if students do their part and complete the classes in what we call their degree maps, but they reach a point, for instance, where they can't take a class because the institution doesn't offer it when the student needs it, or the institution, that then we say the institution should either make another course available or bear the cost of an extra class instead of the student. So while degree mapping here is critical, we also want our universities and publicly supported colleges also to be full partners with our students in achieving the objectives of those degree maps as well. If students do everything they need to do to make progress toward graduation, we believe they should not be forced to extend their time that it would take because the required class is unavailable, and so that's that spirit of cooperation. Each year a student remains in higher education. We all know it costs the student about $50,000, and it deprives our state of one more productive member of the workforce. And you know, as I began to talk about this in terms of on-time completion, you know, I said to folks, you know, that you know, I don't know a lot about the cost of higher education. I'm learning every single day, but last year I used to say to people, all I know for sure is 5 years of higher education costs more than 4 years, right? And 3 years costs less than 4 years. And so the more that we, and this the purpose of this legislation, by reallocating a portion of existing student grants to return a portion of the cost savings the state recognizes to the student. We've included some incentives that go straight to the student's pocket. $1,500 for early graduation from a bachelor's program, $1,000 for graduating on time. For an associate's degree, students will get a bonus of $1,250 for graduating early and $750 for graduating on time. You know, I'm someone who believes that what you subsidize you get more of, what you tax you get less of. And so what we want to do is use some of the savings that we will achieve by students completing their degree work on time and use that as an incentive in a grant program to students, and that's included in the legislation. Another piece of legislation I want to talk about has to do with remediation, which is the leaders in higher education in this room all know is a very significant issue in the Hoosier State. House Bill 1005 is moving through the legislative process. It's on our legislative agenda. It's designed to help control the cost of higher education by ensuring high school students enter college prepared for college coursework. Now, many of you are painfully aware that 1/3 of our high school graduates require some form of remediation after high school. 1/3. We know these students will take longer and spend more time to obtain degree due to the extra time and cost of post-secondary remediation. And that's if they continue to complete a degree at all. You know, as I've talked to leadership in higher education in the Hoosier State over the last year, many believe that the issue of remediation, as well as the lack of fulsome career, technical, and vocational pathways at the secondary level is a large contributing factor to our non-completion rate in higher education in Indiana. And so we want to focus, as I mentioned earlier, on making sure that young people are headed to secondary education, and that's where their gifts are and that's where they're going to prosper. But we also want to make sure that we mitigate and deal with remediation at the secondary level, and not place that burden on our students and on our institutions of higher education, even while we drive toward on-time completion. Now, according to Complete College America, of the 46.4% of two-year college freshmen in Indiana who required remediation, only 9.2% will graduate within 3 years. Of the 12.4% of freshman students enrolled in four-year programs who required remediation, only 41.2% will graduate within 6 years. Now, these are tough statistics, but they're reality, and they tell us that we have to do better. When we hand students a high school diploma, they and their family assume that it indicates they're ready for post-secondary coursework. And yet, 1 of every 3 students who arrive at our colleges and universities learns that they have to take remedial classes that don't count toward a degree just so they can be ready to take credit-bearing courses. And then we wonder why so many students are having trouble graduating within 4 years. We have to continue to address this by ensuring that we demand high standards and accountability in K-12 education. It's the right thing for our kids. It's the right thing to do for our state. And we're continuing to drive an innovative agenda of reform and opportunity in our K-12 system. But that's also why we're supporting House Bill 1005, which is a bill that will significantly reduce the number of students who require post-secondary remediation. It'll provide K-12 educators with the tools that they need to identify in high school those students who are at risk and requiring remediation, and provide them with the opportunity to get the extra help they need before they graduate and head to college or the workforce. So today's remarks that I hope were brief enough to still be characterized as opening remarks and a welcome, I hope should demonstrate to all of you that our administration is passionate about creating educational opportunities for young people in Indiana. We're passionate about creating more effective pathways so that our young people are college ready or career ready by the time that they graduate from high school. We're determined to address the issue of cost in higher education by working with legislators and working with policy leaders like all of you gathered in this room to make sure that we're driving in full partnership with our universities. We're driving towards on-time completion and lowering that extraordinary burden of debt that we place on so many young people. And we're doing it, as I close here, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do for our young people. First and foremost, you know, we owe it to our young people. I think maybe other than public safety, which is a preoccupation for your governor every day, 24 hours a day. The second thing I think about most of the time is making sure that we meet our obligation to our young people. From looking for ways, as we are in legislation, to expand opportunities for pre-K education in Indiana for underprivileged children around the state, for making sure that we're expanding educational choice and opportunities and innovation in our traditional K-12 education, expanding our charter school programs, and making sure that we're funding excellence by rewarding our traditional public schools that are getting the job done, and highlighting the schools and highlighting the teachers that are achieving excellence and outcomes for our young people. But it also means forging new partnerships between our post-secondary institutions and our high schools to make sure that we become the state in the union that's creating the effective pathways in secondary education for young people to begin to access a quality post-secondary education even before they graduate. And lastly, it's about making sure when our kids go to college that they're ready for college, that we've dealt with the issue of remediation before they get that high school diploma, that they understand the standards that are going to be placed on them when they arrive at the outstanding institutions that call Indiana home, and then making sure that we have a full partnership with higher education in the Hoosier State to make sure that our young people are finishing that degree on time and able to enter the workforce, hopefully right here in the Hoosier State, as soon as is humanly possible. And now all of that's just the right thing to do for our young people. It's the right thing to do for our kids that are growing up in the city and on the farm. But make no mistake about it, I'll end where I began, and that is, there is no question in my mind that the topic of this H. Kent Weldon Annual Conference on Higher Education, meeting the workforce demand and aligning higher education with Indiana's economic future, is the right focus. Because while the first reason we ought to do it is because it's right for these young people, okay? We're just going to do right by them. We're going to meet, our generation is going to meet our obligation to that generation, and someday it'll be your turn, okay? The second reason we're doing it is because aligning higher education with our economic future and our potential is the key to unlocking the full potential of our state. It's the key to a key metric of our administration. I've said it once, I've said it many times. I look at our team every week and I say, our goal is nothing less than having more people going to work every day in Indiana than ever before in our state's history. And that is not going to happen unless we bring all the stakeholders together, beginning with education at every level, and that we align education in the Hoosier State to be meeting the needs of our workforce today and tomorrow. And in this, Indiana will be a leader. All right? I'll tell you that we've had more than a few ribbon cuttings since I raised my right hand and became your governor. But the one the two that I'll mention in particular that were most meaningful to me, one took place in Kokomo and one took place up on the north side of Indianapolis. An enormous investment by Chrysler in north central Indiana takes place. And then Geico, an insurance company that had no operational footprint apart from sales in the Hoosier State, just stepped up and announced they're bringing as many as 1,200 new jobs to the Hoosier State by 2016. I said at the press conference announcing the Geico jobs that the CEO was there, all the Geico leadership was there, and the lizard was there too. He's taller than he looks on TV. But in talking to the CEO of Chrysler and talking to the CEO at Geico, I just, as you close today and you know about the urgency of the issue and the focus of this conference, let me tell you, both of them said to me that they recognize that Indiana obviously is the best people in the world and it's the best location in America. And our cost of living, our strong balance sheet, our commitment to economic reforms and education reforms. But they said to me, the reason we're here is your workforce. I mean, the CEO of Geico said, we're here because I think this was the fourth Berkshire Hathaway company that came to the Hoosier State. And they said, we're here because our other three companies unrelated to Geico just said, this is a fantastic place to do business and you've got great people. And we look forward to having them in droves in these hallways. And I'll tell you one last thing. When I was talking about this business of aligning secondary education, post-secondary education, higher education with our workforce needs in Indiana, the CEO of Chrysler, as I talked to him about Indiana leading in this regard, I almost, when you go to these ribbon cuttings, they have you in the back room and you do kind of the handshake and the photo op, and it's supposed to be just a couple of minutes. I mentioned what Indiana's doing in this regard. I couldn't get the CEO of Chrysler out of the back room and out to the podium to cut the ribbon. He said if you do that, Indiana will be in the forefront of the country. He said if you will align secondary education, post-secondary education, and business opportunities in your state on a regional basis, he said you'd be the only state in the union to do it. And I'll never forget him putting his finger in the chest of one of his senior brass and saying, you make sure we're involved in that. And so this is about Indiana doing what's right for our kids, okay, by making them better prepared for college and making college more affordable, all right, and making sure our kids have fulsome opportunities in secondary education to access that post-secondary work and to either get started in that career or get started in higher education according to their God-given abilities and according to their passion. But make no mistake about it, this is also about unlocking a boundless economic future for the people of our state. And when we do that, when we make education, K-12 education, post-secondary education, higher education in the Hoosier State work for all of our young people today and tomorrow, Indiana will be known everywhere as the state that works, where our schools work for all of our kids, for all of their futures, and Indiana will help lead this country back to the kind of educational framework and foundation for prosperity that'll create a boundless American future. So let's get to work. Thank you all very much. It's an honor to be able to open up with you today. And I'm grateful for the leadership of everybody in this room. God bless you.